So when you have these downloaded, I gave you this handout on georeferencing. We have georeferenced files, which means they have a coordinate system and coordinates. We have ungeoreferenced files that do not have coordinates or a coordinate system. So you can open up ArcMap and bring in at first your georeferenced files. Silverbow County, we'll start with Silverbow County. And I would like to georeference to NAPE imagery. We're going to use Silverbow County just to locate where we are on the NAPE imagery. So go ahead and set that to hollow. All we're doing here is making sure we're in the right location. And then bring in the National Agricultural Imagery Program. That's the USDA CONUS Prime. Bring that into your map. If you are centered on Silverbow County, it'll pull up right on Silverbow County. All we're using Silverbow County for is to locate where we are. Does anyone not have the link for the NAPE imagery? You got it? Okay, perfect. If you don't have that, let me know. I'll show you how to get it again real quick. All right, the next thing I'd like you to bring in from the ungeoreferenced files is Google Earth Silverbow County. Bring that into your map. You're going to get a message that's familiar, unknown spatial reference. Just say, okay, we're not going to define or project this one. If you open it and look at the properties to find the coordinates, you'll see they don't make any sense. 9, 13, and 0, 0. So it doesn't have coordinates assigned for this. All it's done is assume the size of the picture and put that at 0, 0 as a coordinate system, which would be the prime meridian and the equator. But that doesn't make any sense. So we don't have a coordinate system coordinates to define our projection to. We have to make those up entirely. If you want to look at the full extent, you'll see that it basically doesn't exist in the frame. It's somewhere way down here, and it's so tiny it doesn't even show up. So that's why we started with Silverbow County, to make sure we knew where we were working. And we're going to bring that file into our map and put it where it's supposed to be. We do not yet have the tools for georeferencing, so let's turn on the georeferencing toolbar. Go to Customize, Toolbars, and check the one that says Georeferencing. Your handout is all about georeferencing and all of the tools in this toolbar. I'm actually going to hover it over here so everybody can see it. Right now, we can't see that file, Google Earth Silverbow County. We just know that it exists. If you want to zoom in on that, you can see what it looks like. Well, mine's acting goofy. Does it? All right, well, let's try this then. Let's put it up in the... Well, I was going to take a minute to show you this, but on your georeferencing toolbar, you have this little window with a magnifier in it. Click on that and it's going to open a separate window with just your Google Earth image in it. This is what your Google Earth image looks like. I don't know why it's being goofy on the other screen.
How did you get that?
What's that?
How did you get that?
I got that from the georeferencing toolbar, and we'll talk through all the tools on the toolbar. But this little icon right here that looks like a separate window with a magnifier on it, it's your viewer window, and it pops up a separate window. And this is really nice if you have two screens. You can put them side by side. But in the meantime, you can probably just shrink this down to fit on your screen. And all of these tools up here are the same as what you have on the top of your regular map. You can zoom to the full extent of just that image, or zoom in and out or pan on just that image. It knows that's the one you want to look at, because your georeferencing toolbar looks for the only thing in your map that's not already georeferenced, that doesn't already have a coordinate system. And that would be the only file in here is Google Earth Silverbow County. So that's why it picked that file. Under your georeferencing tool, we have a couple of tools that are going to light up as we go along. But one of the first things I want to do, because this is hovering off in space, I'm going to move this over. Because this is hovering off in space, I'm going to close my image window, zoom back into Silver Bow County. Instead of hovering off in space, I want that to show up over here because my plan is to take that image and match its locations, the locations that exist on this map. That way, we are going to basically drag it across your screen, shift it a little bit, squeeze it into place, and then say, boom, right there. Give it the coordinates that exist right there. And you can permanently stamp the coordinates to your file, or you can create a new file that adds permanently stamped coordinates. But what we need to do to start that is to be in the right general vicinity. So by getting into Silver Bow County like this, I know I'm in the right area. I've looked at what my image looks like. I know that my georeference toolbar is looking for that particular file. I'm going to drop my georeferencing tool and say fit to display. That's going to drag that map up to sit on top of my, well, because I have it above my nape imagery, it's going to drag it in to fit my display. Right off the bat, it's a really close match because I clipped this to actually fit Silver Bow County, which gives you a good head start for how to do this. All right, now this is my personal preference. You do not have to do this. You can do it on your screen here. The best way to do this is to turn this on and off. So it never really leaves your map. It stays in your map, you're looking at it or not. I personally prefer to leave this turned off and look at it only in my viewer window. Because especially when you're just learning how to do this, it's very easy to assign your coordinate on the wrong map initially. The most important thing you can remember when you're georeferencing is always start on the map you're georeferencing and go to the map that is georeferenced, okay? So every time I assign a control point, which is basically saying this is where this point on that map exists, you need to go from the unreferenced map to the map that is referenced. These are your control points, right here. The other trick to doing this is because we are going to take this map and stretch it and warp it and squeeze it all over the place, go to your corners. Start in one corner and go to the opposite corner, then go to another corner and go to the opposite corner from that one. That will accurately stretch your map the best way possible. If you are really good, you can get away with just 3 points. That's not going to happen today. The more points you add, the more it stretches and warps your image. As we go through this, if you assign a bad point, you can easily take that out. So don't worry if you screw one up. I'll show you how to do that. But the other trick is, look for easily identified features. Down here we see agriculture beating up against the hills. Look for something, one of these pivots that you see on both maps that you can identify. Maybe over here we see some drainages intersect. That's a good point. Up here, anything that you see as a predominant feature on both maps gives you a location you can add a control point. So we're going to try and add our first control point. Let's see. Looking at this map, in the bottom left-hand corner, it looks like there's a bend in the river here that I can see here. And it's not exactly in the corner, but there aren't a whole lot of easily identified features over here, except maybe this looks like some sort of topographic feature with a point. It appears to be the same point here. I'm going to add one control point and we'll see how this does. Click add a control point and go from your ungeoreferenced map to your georeferenced map. Now, because I have mine unchecked, it's not showing up on my map. If you have it checked, you'll see it jumps when you do that. Every time you add a point, it jumps. If it jumps off of your image viewer, you can hit the little world key to bring it back in.
So what if you want to redo that?
If you want to redo that, leave that one alone for 1 minute. We'll add another one, and then once you have a couple added, we'll see how bad the other ones are. It's okay. This is actually a good question. It's a really good question. We're going to do it in just a second. But once we have a couple control points added in, it's easier to remove the bad ones because we'll see them. They'll be very obvious where they are. All right, so on the opposite corner, we have a really easily identified drainage here. I would go maybe to the top of this drainage where it hits the mountain front. From your referenced map, unreferenced map to your referenced map. And notice in my image viewer, it tilted because it just took that image and shifted it a little bit to meet my second point. If I move my image viewer and turn it on over here, it's already getting pretty close. If you look at this light and dark area right here, they're pretty close to overlapping at this point. So I know I've got two halfway decent points. Now I want to go up to one of the opposite corners. Let's see if there's a good feature up there to identify. Looks like this kind of a steep peak. Yep. Okay. If you get where I'm going, add a couple of control points, and it's okay if they get goofy, because we're going to talk about that.
So it keeps jumping these spaces a lot.
Okay.
So like I move it up and it flips.
Okay, let me see this. Okay, so you have
You can probably do it.
I just stopped.
okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and delete them both
No.
real quick and let you add a new one.
Oh, I haven't tried
I
that.
don't know why, but one of the reasons I like to not put it on my screen is when I'm getting somewhere.
Oh,
I don't check it because of that.
Still there.
So I like to check.
I
I only look at it here. Hit the little world or something, and click it back in. So let's try this little point right here. That little point. Go from this one to this one.
Are you trying to do your third? Maybe you have to
Okay, now he said there's a again.
like add control points now to auto registrations.
He's still in this.
Maybe one of them is really the other side.
I'm trying to manipulate over here. I don't see them.
Okay, so try another one.
Did you get your second one on? The second one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, then I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you want me to try it?
No.
So I'm just scared.
Okay. So now I'll turn it back on.
Can you just see the layer?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's good, you're good. You probably had a good
See,
control point, basically, it was dragging you all over the place. We're gonna talk about that. One of the things I absolutely do not want you to do when you're doing this for real is do it in a straight line. You want to stick to the corners for your first points. You can get into the middle as you go, but always start on the outside of the image. But you're good now. It's not going to screw you up to do that. Okay. I'm going to intentionally add a wonky one so you can see what happens when you get a bad one. Did I hear a question? Oh, no, okay. All right, so every time this jumps off my screen, I can bring it back in that way. If I accidentally add a wonky one, let's say I put a point down in the middle of the pit and add it over here, well, this is what's going to happen if you don't go corner to corner. So this is going to tell you that you're going to get a bad work because I've got 1 and 2 on opposite corners, and I put this one in the middle of those two. That's why you want to go to the outside corners so you don't change your work. So this was a bad example of what I was trying to show, but it's an example of why you should go to the corners. It doesn't like to do that with your map. It's going to end up stretching it strangely. Let's see how it looks. Yeah. If you put a point in the middle, it's going to work it strange. And what's happened here is I put a really bad point in. It completely screwed up the whole thing. So I've got a bad point. Let me see. My link table here, right next to the image table, if you open that up, it'll show you your points. Here are my control points. If I'm going to turn my Google Earth back on, you can see how wonky it is on the screen. I know that my third point is the bad point. I'm going to uncheck that one. And because I don't have enough points to really bring this into the frame, and it thinks that third point still exists, it's not going to show up on my map. It's showing me the point where it started back at 0 and the point where I put it on. I want to get rid of 3 altogether. So I highlight that one and delete it from my link table. Now that point no longer exists as a control point, so it's going to bring it back into my map. All right. So I'm going to add at least one more point. At least one more point to my map, because minimum of 3, the more generally the better until you start really warping your map altogether. I think we talked about putting one up here. And you can see it's gotten really close because it thinks that point is just a little bit off of where it actually is at this point. So it's warped it pretty well. And my last point should be down in the bottom corner, so I'm going to choose this area where the ag fields are. And looks like there's a little spurt of green coming off over here. There's my 4th control point. I'm going to close out my image table and turn this back on. And by clicking it on and off, I can see how closely I matched. Now, if I added a bad point that wasn't terrible, but wasn't very good either, so I'm doing it at a major distance here. If I added a point just a little bit off, I'm going to close my image view so you can see it. You have a couple of different ways to know that that's a bad point. On your map itself, it shows you where you started in green and where you landed in red, where it moved it to from where it started. The longer this little blue line is in between those, the worse the error is. And on your link table, you have the root mean squared error on here to tell you how bad your error is. This is my worst point, 1986. That's my 5th point. That's the one I added. If I uncheck that, all the rest of my residual errors drop quite a bit. And if I look at my map, all of my little blue lines shrink considerably. Does this make sense? We have one other option here. If you happen to have a map with known control points, you can add and actually assign the X and Y locations of those maps. In this case, I don't have one. I'm not going to do that. I don't have an accurate location. I'm going to remove that. But if you know where a point is, you can hover over here, click on something, and add a control point. You can actually specifically say where it started and where it finished on your map. How are we looking? Is everybody looking kind of close at least? This isn't particularly easy, especially with an image file like this. Okay, so when it does that, it's because it's moved it so far off the screen doesn't pan with it. So just take a little word there and it'll always bring it right back into just that image.
Yeah. I kept doing that earlier, I was doing that over here.
Turn it, you unchecked it. When it's checked, it'll do that on the map itself. When it's unchecked, you won't see it. So it doesn't look like yours is currently in place. Let's see your control points. Okay. Okay, we'll set up a couple of control points. It's not going to jump on the map if it doesn't have more than one control point. Add a couple of control points. Play with this for a minute and add a bunch of control points. Add as many as you want. When you get a really good match like this, generally, your best bet is to just leave it alone. And you'll find the more control points you add, once you've got them on the outside perimeters like that, you can add them anywhere. That's just where you start. The more control points you add, the more it works your map. And remember, it's working it from point to point. So it'll take it and stretch it in all kinds of different directions based on where you add control points. And it's going to try and stretch it to every single point that you give it. So I'm just going to let you guys play with that for a minute. If you have questions, raise your hand, Tyler, I'll come around.
So you want us to go into the link, unclick the one that's the highest.
The one, in your case, the first one was the bad one. If you know for a fact that that one is really bad, if it's really bad, highlight it.
It's not my highest one, is that weird?
It's what?
Not my highest residual.
Well, let's look at it because it's not just the residual you want to look at, it's also the length of the blue arrows. Not arrows, the blue lines.
Yeah. Oh, well, I need this one. So here's mine. I knew my first one was off. But it seems like the third one would be more nice.
So let's know your first one wasn't correct.
Yeah.
Let's uncheck it, see what happens.
And that's not good ones to form this, but unput this. Yeah.
You can see how your other points got real tiny. Now I bet your error has changed to be really small. If you know that your piece is bad, and you have 3 other points, you can get it to view, you can get it to come in that place. It looks like these 3 are good. Turn it on and off so you can see how it goes.
So I want this one.
Just click on it. See how close it is? See, look at that. The green is coming through and ending in the same place here.
Oh, so it was my first one.
It was your first point.
Okay, so
But these are the features you want to look for where a river goes.
yeah,
across your
raster
map.
matches and things like that.
Yeah.
That is pretty spot on, actually.
So your first point was the one that was messing up. If you know that that's a bad point, I didn't want you to remove it initially because you didn't have enough points for it to jump on your screen. Once you have 3 points, it'll jump on your screen.
So now I can go even though it's not labeled as one.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so let's say I want to do this now. I'm going to go start down here to the strangeness. Here's a 2 point.
No,
Here's something right here.
That's totally fine. If it's an identifiable feature to you, you can see clearly on both maps. That is better than picking it somewhere else.
So here's where they come bigger. See how there's like a box? That wasn't there before. Is that weird?
Oh, that's your little snap tool. It's snapping 2 features on the map.
Oh, I don't think I like that.
Okay, you want me to turn that off for you?
Well, it just snapped me. If I did it, would it snap to the center of that box?
It's snapping to your Silverbow County line. See how it's highlights and says Silverbow County? It's just snapping to your Silverbow County line.
So it's probably
you
not
haven't
really
supposed to. No, it's not that perfect thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you guys snapping real quick because we've talked about this.
How do I tell? Now I can exit out.
Yeah, you can exit that one out.
And then,
Turn it on and off and see how it looks. It looks like it might not have been as good because your points were closer before. And now you have the lines on all of them. So it looks like that one might not have been as good. Watch. Does the drainage match as well? Does the drainage match as well? This one's a little bit off. So I would pick a slightly
different point.
I would take a slightly different point, but I also noticed that you didn't have exactly in mind where you were going. The second point down. So I bet you just a hair off. A little bit makes a big difference.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We have talked about this and I've had questions about it and I never showed it to you guys before, and this has nothing to do with georeferencing. If you'll go up to customize and open your toolbars again, check this snapping toolbar. You're going to get this to come up. Go ahead and dock that. We'll just leave that. The default for GIS, when you hover near a feature, in this case, the only real feature we have is Silverbow County. When you hover near a feature, it wants to jump to that feature and it puts this little box up. That is snapping to that outline or to that feature. If you don't want it to do that and you want to have complete control, which in this case, if you happen to get close to Silverbow, the Silverbow County line is going to be a benefit. You don't want to use that snapping. So drop that snapping toolbar and uncheck use snapping. Now when I hover around the Silverbow County line, my snapping doesn't appear. It's no longer trying to jump to that feature. So again, this has nothing to do with georeferencing other than it'll make your life a little bit easier when you're trying to get very specific.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How's everybody looking? Do we have any questions? Just playing with it?
I had a crash and I'm now recovering.
Okay. We're going to do another one that's a little bit easier, but this is a good way of looking at the landscape.
Yeah, I was struggling for a while on my first one, then I realized that somehow it had ended up upside down, and so then trying to reference things that
Makes it
are upside
difficult.
down wrong side.
Yeah. So you do actually have an option to do that. You have an option to play with your files. You can, before you start adding control points, if you say scanned this map and you're trying to georeference it, but your scanner was turned sideways, you can rotate right, left, flip horizontal, flip vertical. Because I've already assigned control points, it doesn't give me these options right now, but that's not an uncommon thing to do. Say I've got a map in landscape, but I want it in portrait. I scanned it the wrong way. Just flip it before you start adding.
Does it have like a hierarchy that runs these control points in and just go from the first that you started to what your last one was?
It does. It actually changes the way it works as you add control points. I was going to talk about this in just a second, but to be honest, I've never really dug into the mathematics of this. On your, let's see. Here it is. The second to last page. This graphic, we're doing, at this point, I think we're doing a first order polynomial shift. So it's not, we don't have so many tokens pulling from other directions, and it starts to like, get a control point here.
Because I-
Trying to pull in different directions. First order is just basically pulling the target square, pulling it like this. Second order stretches it in other angles. So as you add control points, it changes how it works, but it doesn't place a priority on one control point or another control point. It gives them all full credit. So if you have a battery that works, it just changes how they do the stretch.
I think I'm doing something systematically wrong, but left it on me again.
Okay.
Because like it was right way.
Just 4, but I did it so many times.
So let's delete your
Just wanted to
control
set
point.
that there.
I think
But
mine.
actually, I'm pretty much solid, like, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, we,
I can use that.
Let's remove
That's
all the
good.
control points. So
I always see that harder.
highlight them and remove them as well. Yep. And then
Okay. Yeah, that's good to go. Fill up those.
now in your window,
You're
bring
just
back to the full extent.
perfect.
Gone back to windows.
Stupid.
Now show me what you were doing.
You good too?
yeah.
Should have seen that in the person. It's like,
Feel the bad.
but this is better now.
Yeah,
I finally got it.
and now it's failing.
Drag it back into the map, remove it, and drag it back into the map.
I think so.
Mine's not having problems.
Mine's pretty too.
It's not. It's too statics.
So show me the
Fucking struggling, dude.
So
They don't like to do.
each day.
I'm fine.
Person's got any first structures.
I think you. She said, "Oh,
Always go
Just got
this one, change that one. You're saying
but you make
20,000 here. What you were telling it was somewhere, so if you do that, I bet it will calculate. I am not going backwards. Always
Because I
go
thought when
from
I
the
had
under.
watched that site opposite.
she
Oh, and I don't always go from under. I bet that's gonna fix it. That's probably why it's flipping. I just wanna make sure that's what you're looking for, like you stretch.
fixed structures first step. What were we supposed to do? Is it top?
Really? I thought the other maps here is better.
You wanna drag it up? You'll be able to.
So I wanted to do that online through there.
So you do that side one for you. And then, when it really gets positioned, it knows where it is, it can start showing up on there. That's why I like to click it when I'm actually getting to my.
It does either, but
Totally personal preference. I'm looking on that online myself too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
That worked?
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so I'm just gonna show you something real quick. I'm not a math whiz and I've never dug into this and how it works exactly, but on the second to last page of your handout, you'll notice in your links table, wherever my links table went, I think I hid mine. Oh, here it is. On your links table, it tells you your transformation, at least mine right now, is first order polynomial or affine. The more points I add, the more complex my stretch becomes. Because I'm effectively doing this like a square, I'm just pulling my square map out into a more uniform square in its proper location, it's not doing a complex transformation. But as I add points that are just a little bit off inside my transformation, it's going to start warping my map more and more, and it's going to change the way that transformation is. I just totally screwed that up and didn't prove my point, but the more points you add and the stranger shape you pull this map into, the more complex the mathematics are to get second and third order polynomials. So the point is, the fewer points you can add to this to get this in as close as you can get it, the better. It's not necessarily better to have 15 points. It's better to have 4 or 5 points than 15. So if you've got it really, really close and you're not looking at measuring on a centimeter scale, be happy with it. Now, one more thing I wanted to show you. The other thing is, I showed you, as I was adding points, it was automatically jumping on my map. I just added 3 points that are way off and it didn't move because I changed the default setting from auto adjust to automatically change every time I do it, to change only when I say update display. When I update the display, it jumps. Well, it should have jumped. Oh, because these aren't checked. It'll jump when I say update display. So if for some reason you're looking to really tightly fine tune this and you don't want to jump every time you're doing something, uncheck auto update. Every single tool on this toolbar and in this toolbar is explained really, really carefully in this handout. Honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory. Most of it's fairly easy to use. The one thing, if you get really lucky, I've never been able to get this to work. Auto registration is fantastic. I've seen it work once, and it didn't work for me, but it worked for one of the students in the class. If your map is so similar that GIS actually recognizes that these are the same map in the same location, this one's Google Earth and the other one's GIS NAPE, but they're effectively the same, just the color difference is too much for GIS to recognize that they're the same place. If you have them that are similar enough, when you auto adjust, they will automatically jump together and they'll be perfect. Like I said, I've never gotten it to work, but I saw it work once in this class 3 years ago, once. So something to consider, just showing you the tools. I'm gonna remove my bad links. I've got the 4 that made it work, and I'm gonna put my auto adjust back on because I want it to jump every time I do this. Now, I've gotten my map right where I want it. This is as good as I'm gonna get it, and I wanna save it this way. I don't wanna have to go through this exercise every time I wanna use this map. So I have 2 options here. Number 1, and please don't do either one of these yet, because as soon as you click one, you're gonna lose the option to do the other. You have Update Georeferencing, and you have Rectify. Update Georeferencing is going to take this raster and assign georeferencing to it. Rectify is going to create an entirely new raster with those coordinates on it. So if you're not 100% positive this is the way you want this to be in perpetuity, you should rectify and create a new raster so you have the original to go back to. If it's exactly the way you want it, you're never going to change it. You're dead set. Update georeferencing and it'll save that one file. Okay? So pick your poison. I'm going to do rectify because it's going to give me an extra window. It has calculated the distance and whatnot and calculated the cell size. Now I just need to tell it where I want it. I'm going to put it on my desktop. Call it rectify. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's asking for a workspace. So I need to put it in my desktop, choose my desktop there, and then give it a name here. Call it rectify. And because it came in as a TIFF, it really should go out as a TIFF. Again, I pointed this out in a previous tool. I can't remember which tool it was, but I said GIS tends to get hung up on little things like this. When it's trying to do some sort of tool and it's trying to process something, it does not like to also change the file type. That's the best way to get yourself an error and not be able to figure out why it's not doing what it's supposed to do. If it comes in as a TIFF, send it out as a TIFF. You can save it later as a different file format. But if you say save, now you have on your desktop, or I have on my desktop, a brand new file called rectify that will come into my map in the correct location and will forever have those coordinates. Now, if I'm going to remove the file I started with, I'm going to get rid of that one and bring it back in. The file that was called Google Earth Silverbow County, it's back to not knowing where it's located. If I had updated the georeferencing, it would behave like rectify. Again, 2 different tools. So if you want to save that to the original, update georeferencing, you're not going to get anything else. You're just going to get update georeferencing. It'll flash and it'll be done. If you want to save a new copy of it, rectify it. Okay? So let's close. Well, keep your georeferencing toolbar on. I'm going to make you do this one more time. Practice makes perfect. Keep everything but Silverbow County, or get rid of everything but Silverbow County from your map. This time, from Georeferenced Files, please bring in the 4 F maps. They should be familiar from originally talking about rasters. These are our classified rasters. So they've got those individual colors like shapefiles. And if you would like to, just to make them clear, remember you can set your white to no color to get rid of those white cuffs. And then it just makes a clearer, more continuous map for you to georeference to. Now, I haven't brought in the ungeoreferenced file yet because I want to point this out. It's trying to grab the first one in my map, F45112E, but it won't let me update or georeference because I haven't added any control points. Be really, really careful. Any raster you have in your map has the possibility of showing up there. If you don't know which one you're georeferencing to, you could accidentally grab the wrong one. because it's reading all of them. You can pick from the list of rasters in your map. It generally knows to look for the one that is unreferenced. So if you want to bring in butte.tiff, that's the unreferenced one. Doesn't have coordinates or a coordinate system. You can pick that one from your map, from your list of rasters, but be aware, when you go to georeference something, you have to choose the right file initially. You'll probably realize it, unless in this case, we're going from a topographic map to a topographic map. It would be easy to miss. When you open your image window, what you're gonna see is the one that you're set to georeference. So in this case, it might not have been immediately obvious, but if you were trying to georeference from a topographic map to an aerial, you would realize immediately that you were looking at an aerial instead of the topo. Go ahead and georeference this one. I'm not going to walk you through this one because I want you guys to try it on your own. It's a little closer view of Butte. As you can see, here's the pit. So we're looking at an area a little further in. This one you should be able to get perfectly exact on the map because it has the most easily identified features of any map. If you zoom in, township, range, and section lines are going to be exact. So look for the same section lines on the outskirts of your map or on the corners of your map. Those red lines are section lines, black lines are township and range lines. So in this case, you can get this dead on if you're really careful about hitting the corner of the section lines.
So you always want to do corner to corner, like you don't want to start at timber view.
You want to do
You know what I'm talking about?
this corner to that corner, as close to the corners as you can get. It's okay if you're like somewhere up here, but just make sure when you go across, do somewhere down here, and then you do the same thing. You just want to go opposite the map. It doesn't matter which corner you start in, just the best bet is to try and keep as big of a space in between them around the outside as you can. If you are looking at features like Timber Butte, in this case, it's a dot. Be really careful using that because this map is drawn to a different scale from this map. So it might not have been drawn in exactly the same place by both authors.
Okay.
So just these section lines are geographically defined. So they're always going to be in the same place.
Oh, the section lines are, so I can go.
The section lines and the township and range lines.
And timber view was too far in the middle, I thought. So I
It might be, so if you want to use Timber Butte, you can, but I would pick the ones on the outside first and then add Timber Butte in the middle.
okay, thank you. Oh, shoot.
How are we doing?
Just frozen there.
Oh, no. So this one can be a little bit tricky if you're familiar with township and range and section. You know that sections go from 1 to 36, kind of in a zigzag pattern across a single township, but then repeats in the next township down. So if you grabbed the wrong number 3 section line and attached it to a different number 3 section line, your map's going to be pretty warped. It's going to be a whole township over or down or up.
Yeah.
I'm betting you went the opposite direction with your points. You probably went from the registered image to the unregistered image.
Yeah, I did do that at first.
So
Yeah.
link that link and try again. It should flip back.
Okay, so just,
That's usually what makes it flip. Something else happens.
Okay. so can I just delete, should I delete the view tip?
Just
And then will it take away my links in my chart?
if you want to get rid of all of them or just one.
My first one was the one that I started with that I made the episode.
Okay, so highlight the first one, just click on it, and then it says that little red X at the top, or you can click the.
Oh, it went away, actually. So that's great. Thank you.
Oh, Brady, this one, I'm not going to grade you on this, so it's just, I said you can get exactly positive like last time, but I don't need to get rid of it. You do not need to be looking at this. I mean, you're talking about sending it on the ground. That's great. Well, I'm glad, because that's kind of the idea. I give you this one so you can see.
Okay, this actually doesn't look the
When
same.
you have really precise points.
I don't know
like
where I
section
think.
lines, you have it.
I'm actually different now. Doesn't look that wrong.
What's that?
I don't know what happened. It's not the same map. Is that super weird? Why am I losing my mind?
No, you might have accidentally changed your map. That's easy to do.
Okay, so I just brought this in, but watch when I bring it up.
So which one is trying to reach? You changed which map I'm reading it, so let's go back to view tip. That's what I was.
So it's like, it's not the same.
That's what I was trying to say earlier. It doesn't, because we were doing two photos, it didn't really be obvious, but if that had been an aerial, you would know immediately. That was the map I'm looking for, so just watch which
I
one.
keep
is
aiming
trying
for this spot. Oh no, look at it. Shoot, why do I keep aiming for this, but it's not right on. But in this
It's
map,
okay, get as close as
it
you can.
is. Okay, so now that I did that, can I
Just what I do when I make an accidental.
escape?
Like that. Add another, yeah, you can hit escape, but I just dropped another one in between.
Oh, okay, so.
That little red X there.
Exactly. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. How you doing?
It's taking me an awful long time.
That looks outstanding. Excellent. Excellent. You really can't get a much better georeference than you can with topos. So, I mean, that's pretty much dead on. All right, I want to show you guys a couple more things because it looks like everybody's got the hang of it. I just threw a bunch of random links on my map. But because I did that, maybe I wasn't paying attention, I was just clicking around. Instead of going through these one by one, I can delete links from my georeferencing drop menu and start over. Also, our options, the blue line, the red plus sign, and the green plus sign don't always work as colors for the map that you're working on. You can change those by going to georeferencing, the drop menu, and saying options. Maybe this green doesn't show up very well on a topographic map, or you want it bolder. You have all kinds of options here, treating that like a point shapefile. Whatever you want to use there, you can change it to something that's more visible for you. These are just the defaults that GIS came up with. Okay, so you don't have to stick with that. You have the option of changing your transformation. I have never dug into the mathematics of this, so I always just stick with the first order polynomial. You can change those, and you'll see it change in your link menu when you do it. The other thing I want to show you, and this is just more a throwback than anything. When we first looked at the types of rasters, I had you guys use the classified raster to build a color map. And that basically condensed all the different colors into a couple of different colors. If what I'm looking for on this map is the red lines and the red section lines, the quickest way to do that is pull that color map back up and only show the red. So I kind of cheated here. I took that old color map and applied it to one of my maps that fell in the right area so that I could quickly and easily identify, without all the extra information, these section lines. So I'm not saying I want you to do this, but I want you to think through the tools that you have and apply them to help you do what you're trying to do in the future. So you have this tool of changing how your core map displays to get rid of the green, and if you wanted to, you could even get rid of the black on here, to really bring all this together to make it easier for you to do your georeferencing. Now, I didn't georeference this one because you guys got the hang of it. In fact, you guys picked this up faster than any other class I've had, which is great. But you have all these other tools at your disposal to help you get there. You cannot do that little trick with this one because it's what? What kind of raster is that one if it's not classified? Please, someone remember. That's a continuous raster. What's that?
Unclassified?
No, that one's that one's continuous because all the colors just run together and have individual pixels instead of being classified as individual and distinct colors. Now the last thing is, on my last map, I showed you that I created my rectify file and I had created this map of Silverbow County. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I had created this map of Silverbow County. I'm going to turn everything else off. So I'm only looking at rectify. I assigned coordinates as well as a coordinate system. What coordinate system do you think I assigned this in? Because it never asked me, did it? It never said, what coordinate system are you assigning these in? Never once.
Whatever the layer is in?
Yes, very good. It's whatever your layer is in. Whatever your data frame is in is what you're viewing this in. So it's assigning the coordinate system based on your layers. In my case, because the first file I brought in was Silverbow County, I'm in state plane. Looks like state plane meters. So my rectify file will be in state plane meters. It assigned coordinates in state plane meters. That make sense? So keep in mind, if you're in a GCS, your coordinates are going to be kind of wonky because it's not projected. So when you're doing this, if you have a small enough area, always make sure your data frame is in the coordinate system you want your files in. All right, I'm going to show you one last thing, and then I'll let you go. Whichever file you have that's large, I'm going to turn Silverbow County back on and bring it to the top. I showed you before the file, the tool called clip, where we can take, say the roads are running all over the place outside of Silverbow County lines, but we're only interested in Silverbow County. I showed you the tool clip that will clip your shapefile to the exact bounds of whatever shapefile you're using. You can do the same thing with rasters, but it's a completely different tool because it's a different data set. A raster is not the same as a shapefile. Arc Toolbox, data management tools, raster, raster processing, clip. So go ahead and open that file. We're going to look at this two different ways because this file will, this tool will do two different types of clips. I'm going to input my rectify file, the one I just created, as the input raster, the one that I want to clip. And what I want to clip it to, the output extent, is Silverbow County, that shapefile, okay? Now all you have to do is tell it where you want this and what to call it. I'm going to put it on my desktop and call it clip 1, because I'm going to run it again. And let's see, it's going in as a TIFF, so we want it to go out as a TIFF. Add that little TIF, .tif, because again, we want to stick with the same properties. Say okay, and run it. I'm going to turn rectify off so you can see it when it pops on there. This one might take a moment. Okay, it clips to the extent of Silverbow County. So why does it have all this extra information? Because when we look at Silverbow County, the shape of this county is not the extent. When we look at the source, and it tells you the extent. It gives you the extent in coordinates here. That's the very top, the very bottom, the very left, and the very right of where that exists in a perfect square. That's not really what I wanted, so I'm going to run clip again. You can run it on the original file or on the clip, whichever one you want. Same way, we're going to clip it to Silver County. This time, check this box at the bottom, use input features for clipping geometry. That's saying use the shapefile, not the extent of the shapefile to clip this. And again, I'm going to call it clip 2 and call it .tif. Save and OK. I accidentally turned clip 2 off. So this time it clips the geometry of the shapefile instead of the extent. Super, super handy if you're trying to limit what you're showing your viewer and your map is just way too cluttered with all that extra information. Just like trying to pick out the section lines when you've got this whole map full of data, and you're looking for where 32 crosses 33, but there's so many of them, and there's so much extra data, it's really hard to pick out. Sometimes limiting your information is just so much easier. The other thing is, if we're working with, say, a giant file that's way more information than we need, and all we're interested in is Silver County, our processing might take forever if we try and do some sort of raster tool on the entire United States. So clip that sucker down to just the area of interest, and you can run everything so much faster. Okay? That's all I have for you tonight. I'm sorry I did not grade your quizzes because I have somebody taking one at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But from what I saw, everybody did pretty good. So don't let it stress you out. I'll get it back to you on Thursday.